To the Inside Carolina. Welcome into the Inside Carolina podcast. Special podcast tonight, folks. Have been asking me, when are we doing the prediction podcast? Because we have been so good doing these prediction podcasts, we felt like we needed to get together again and do them. And I've got some expectations to live up to. I've been consistently bad in these, so we'll see what we can have. Johnny T-shirt, of course, is our sponsor. Support them, rate them, review them. Review us as well. We'll be right back with prediction season on Inside Carolina. All right, boys. Inside Carolina podcast. This is fun now. I look on my screen here and I see the legends of Inside Carolina, and it's just heartwarming to me. And Buck Sanders, I got to lead with you. This is the prediction show. You look forward to this show as much as any of them, right, Buck? Tell us why.
Absolutely. It's just a lot of fun, and we tabulate the results, and we talk junk to each other all year long when we get things wrong, and so it makes it entertaining internally and externally.
And of course, we have Jason Staples down there, proudly supporting his Inside Carolina shirt or sporting his Inside Carolina shirt. Greg Barnes comes in with us. Greg, hopefully, will be a Thursday feature. Taylor Vippolis. If Taylor's screen goes dark, do not worry. He will be back shortly. What's going on, Taylor?
It's going great. Just got off the pickleball courts, and it's an honor to be on here with you gentlemen tonight.
Greg Barnes, what's it like, man?
Gentlemen, yeah.
Taylor is aging before us, Tommy. Talking about pickleball.
Pickleball is a young man's game right now. You go to the court.
You need to ask Michael Brooker about playing pickleball and what it's like when you start getting older and play. I think he was on the DL with an ACL on the pickleball court. Leave that stuff to the old people. Buck, let's get this started. Carolina opens the season roughly a week from now, 9 days from now, against Florida A&M. Do we all agree that this is a win for the Tar Heels? Everybody raise their hands. Win for Carolina. Any shot that this is a close football game, Greg Barnes?
No. No, I think the conversation here, Tommy, is what do we expect out of a North Carolina win? And we can touch on that if you want, but in terms of win-loss, I don't think there's much discussion.
Carolina will make news on that day because one of those quarterbacks was tried out there first against Florida A&M. I'm personally looking forward to the Marching 100. To see how the band breaks it down in Kenan Stadium, to see how it's done. But let's move on. The season starts in Boone. And, Buck, I am going to come to you first with your first pick at Appalachian State. I will say this, the first time in the 2022 season, this is a must-win for Mack Brown.
It wouldn't be you if you didn't say it was a must-win. Well, as we get started, I would note that first and foremost, remind yourself all year long that North Carolina went 0-6 on the road last year. So here's their first road game of 2022, and it's a chance for them to break that trend. We'll see if they do or not. One thing that's a little bit talk about the things that encourage me about this game. App State is 104th nationally in returning defensive production. And so if North Carolina has some growing pains to do offensively, which I expect they will, it's going to help that probably App State is not quite as stout as they normally are there. And for those of you that are stat geeks, App State is one of the 7 teams in the NC and the FBS that has been in the top 50 in offense and defense for the last 3 years running. Only 6 other teams have done that. But the other thing that encourages me a little bit is it's the first game for App State and the second game for UNC. Usually you pick up your most games from game 1 to game 2. Final thought is, how will they handle the Mountaineers crowd? It's a small stadium, but it's going to be loud and noisy, no question. And just for the record books, the Tar Heels are a 5.5 favorite on FPI and a 2.4 favorite on the SP Plus. And if you go to Jason Staples next, I want to remind him that I have this device that I am using this year. So when the sands of time run out, so does your commentary there, Jason, per pick.
Are you sure that's not a time turner? I feel like that might give me extra time here if that's a time turner.
No.
There is no off season, but there is a sand season. So short and sweet, Jason, since he set it up on the tee for you.
Yeah, he actually hit the main point that I was going to hit on this, which is that this is the second game for Carolina, which I think is a big deal here. The week 0 game, I think, actually really gives Carolina a nice benefit in terms of being able to work out the kinks of a first game, and especially with App really not returning a whole lot of production and experience on offense or on defense. I think that makes a big difference. I think Carolina should win this game. I think they will win this game, and I think that sets a nice tone for the season, starting out 2-0 against soft first opponent, and then a pretty decent non-conference group of 5 team, a good group of 5 team, and a pretty decent team overall. I think they'll get that win.
Vip, you're next, and then Greg Barnes.
Yeah, the thing I'm looking forward to seeing in this game is like that perceived like strength on strength. App State's strength on their team is their offensive line. They're only replacing one person on their offensive line. They do have production coming back from there. It was an offensive line that I had last year. They were 12th in the country, sacks allowed, and then they were 33rd in the country for rushing offense. And then obviously the talk of this North Carolina defense has been Mack Brown stacking talent on the defensive line. So this is going to be a great test early for North Carolina. There's a reason why this spread is 2.5. This has trap game written all over it for like a casual bettor when they're looking at App and North Carolina. I think if I'm picking North Carolina to win this game. I think kind of like Jason said, the fact that this is week 2 for Carolina is really going to help them. But I have been in some tough environments. Like the ECU game in 2014, where it's like once one thing goes bad there, it can snowball really quick out of control when you have a crowd that's rocking like that. But I think North Carolina with App State's defense, I think this is a game where they can kind of lean heavily on their own run game and kind of control the ball and win this game.
I'll freely admit I've never been to a game at App State, so I don't have any idea what the environment is. I've heard it's pretty raucous, but Greg, does it matter for a North Carolina team going up there? Buck's fact about winless on the road should make people a little nervous.
Yeah, I completely agree with the idea that this is Carolina's second game versus App State's first. However, this is App State's first game for the crowd. And Kid Brewer, if you haven't been there, it's a fantastic stadium. I think it holds 30,000, but they got 35,000 in for the Wake Forest game a couple years ago. I imagine they'll break that for the Carolina games. Already sold out. That place is going to be rocking. And Carolina has to be on its P's and Q's early because any momentum in App's favor is really going to help that team. The offense returned 7 starters. Chase Bryce had a really good year last year. We knew kind of what he did at Clemson and Duke wasn't great, but he proved that he could play last year. He's lost a lot of wide receivers. Running backs are good, though. And yes, the defense lost a lot of production. However, that defense is ranked in the top 30 nationally in scoring defense for 7 straight years. They know what to do on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, what's the guy's name? Kevin Barbay from Central Michigan. He's their 5th offensive coordinator in 5 years. That's potentially a problem. All that to be said, as I've said before, Carolina's going to have to bring their A game to win this one. And if they do, they will win. But if they slip up and they allow App State to gain momentum early, maybe get some turnovers, it's going to be a long day in Boone. But I've got Carolina winning this one.
All right. The peer pressure is starting to bother me a little bit. Carolina's got to win this game at App. They got to win. I mean, if Mack Brown rolls up the App, and Greg, you made the point last week that we discussed your stat, Mack just can't beat places he's coached, other than Tulane, I think, a couple of years back in the day. They've got to win. And I think because of the numbers Buck threw out there, and I think because of this defensive line, and because I don't think Chase Bryce is very good. I mean, he was good for a couple throws at Clemson. He was not good at Duke. He's decent. I think Carolina wins the game to go 2-0 on the season. I'll tell you this: if they lose, I don't want to be on Inside Carolina's message boards for the next week or so because they're going to have to pull a 2015 run if they don't beat App State. Put us down for wins, John Bauman. What you got? I've got, and just so folks know, Adam Smith and Ross Martin both have Florida A&M as wins and App State as wins.
I'm bringing up the big board for the first time tonight. This will be what we use to track picks.
Now, can I make a suggestion here real quick as we're going? I probably should have done this before we started recording, but anybody interested in putting percentages down for these games in terms of confidence percentages?
If we do that, Buck's going to have to get a much bigger hourglass.
No, it's not. I mean, it's just adding a number.
I definitely would need a bigger hourglass. You know, I think anybody that wants to can qualify their level of, confidence in whether they're picking Team A or Team B. But I think we'll make it optional this time around. Next time, maybe we'll go with the probabilities.
All righty. Well, I'm going to take that option then. I'm going to go with an 80% on app. I like their odds here.
Wow, that's a big one. At Georgia State. Before this podcast, I mentioned off air, I've got some misgivings about these first three games. Carolina has found a way to lose one of these games like this. Florida A&M won't be a loss, but App and at Georgia State have always seemed to be troublesome for Carolina. Greg, I'll start with you first. Georgia State, pretty good team last year, got whipped by Carolina in Kenan Stadium. What's the difference this year for Georgia State? Down in, I guess, Old Turner Field or excuse me, it's the Braves Field. It's Turner Field, isn't it, that they recreated for Georgia State Stadium?
Yeah, I think the game last year in Kenan has kind of tainted people's opinion of Georgia State. But I think some forget that Georgia State had the ball in the third quarter down 14. And then Sam Howell did Sam Howell things, and I think led Carolina on 5 straight touchdown drives that really blew that game wide open. A couple weeks later, Georgia State goes down to Jordan Hare and lost to Auburn by 10. And then they won 7 of the last 8 to close out the season, including knocking off Coastal Carolina, which was in contention for a CFP bid. So after a slow start, and then they got blasted by Army early and the Carolina game, of course, they really played well. And the problem for Carolina is that Georgia State returns 18 starters. So this is a team that had a lot of confidence closing the year. They're going to have a lot of confidence starting the year. Very good rushing attack, solid defensively, and it's on the road. The fact that Carolina has back-to-back road games at Sunbelt schools is quite the anomaly. But I've got Carolina winning this one, although I don't think this is going to be the blowout that it was last year. I think this could be a competitive game.
Producer John, I missed you on the app pick.
I'm going lost. First surprise of the night, perhaps. My stat of the night, since 2010, UNC has started 3-0 2 times. And Greg can double check me on that. I'm pretty sure it's right. So they're going to, I think, drop one of these first 3 games, and this is the most likely one for me. I'll hand it back over to you, Tommy, to roll through the Georgia State picks.
It looks like Slagle wants you fired already.
Oh, no.
It was a good run. A couple weeks. Vip, Carolina goes to Atlanta to play Georgia State. Everybody says, why in the world are they playing down there against Georgia State? I think it's pretty cool. But does it matter where this game is being played? Does the app game help Carolina going to Georgia State?
It does matter to a certain extent that this game is in Atlanta. I really like Sean Elliott as a motivator for a coach. He's the cameras are going to love him every time it's on him in the pregame, and he's getting all rah-rah. Shout out to Quinshaw Davis, their receiver coach. No offense to the Georgia State program. If North Carolina loses this game, pack it up and shut the season down. North Carolina's not losing this game. Come on.
Buck Sanders.
Well, I think there's all this talk about App State. I think the Georgia State game worries me more so than the App State game. They got, 25th nationally in returning production. Last year they played Auburn at Auburn, and they had a 24-19 lead headed into the fourth quarter. These guys are capable of playing. This is not some cupcake FCS team that we're going to play this year. Although the score last year, North Carolina made it look that way. I agree with several of you that have already said it, that this is a team that needs to be taken seriously. This is the kind of game that North Carolina doesn't take opponents seriously. They overlook them. They think, oh, we're UNC. We'll just go down there and beat. And then they get their clock cleaned. So, I'm going to pick North Carolina in this one, but I hope it's a game that North Carolina takes very seriously when they go down to Atlanta and face Georgia State. They won 7 of their last 8 games last year. And, they beat Coastal Carolina and some other teams that are decent, that you have to watch out for. So, I expect a battle in Georgia State. If North Carolina wins by a couple of touchdowns, and I think that's a good sign for the year. But it's possible that they won't have that 14-point bulge.
Jason, Buck just flipped the sands of time on you. What you got in this game? Georgia State's a decent little team.
I'm with Taylor here in terms of Georgia State's. They're not a bad football team. They're a good football team. But look, we watched both those teams play last year, just in terms of the bodies on the field. And yeah, it was a 14-point game in the third quarter before all those touchdown drives, were led by Sam Howell. But I just can't get out of my head that Carolina was able to bully them in the running game sort of as they pleased last year. And I think Carolina's running game this year is going to be just as good as it was last year. And I think, just physically speaking, Carolina should win this game at this point in the year. I think the quarterback play for Carolina is going to be good. And so I don't see a whole lot of reason to really feel like this one's going to be a huge problem, or that it should be a huge problem. So I'm going to go with Carolina winning this one. And again, I'm going to give a 0.9 on this, a 90% confidence that Carolina wins this game. So that's where I'm at.
Interesting picks. And John, yeah, for sure. Throw up some of the fan YouTube chat predictions as well. We've got Gregory Hall in the chat as well. Gregory is, he thinks he can check out of Inside Carolina, but he could never leave. It's Hotel Inside Carolina here. And we're going to pull you in here in a minute, Gregory, but we can't like bring the legend to the show to start with. So we're going to keep it off. Who we got left? I'll go with Carolina over Georgia State. I believe that I have a outcome in the season. I think somewhere in the midst of App in Georgia State, that outcome could change. But for right now, I'll go with Carolina over Georgia State to go 3-0 for the first time or the third time since 2010. Who's left? Greg, did you pick it?
I did. I picked Carolina to win this one.
All right. John B., what you got?
I'll take a North Carolina win here. And can you feed me Ross and Adam's picks as well?
Ross and Adam both have Carolina over Georgia State going 3-0. Each of them have them going 3-0 to start the season, going into the bye week. Guys, Carolina's either 3-0 or 2-1 if you're John B. Buck, if Carolina's 3-0, you got to think Notre Dame's going to get beat by Ohio State. But it doesn't really matter about the Irish at that point. If Carolina's 3-0, this Notre Dame game becomes gigantic in Kenan Stadium on September the 24th. You're up first. You're the El Presidente. You take on your favorite, and I'm joking, non-North Carolina team in the Irish. What does Carolina do here?
Well, a lot can go as you kind of set up there, Tommy. If North Carolina, comes into this game 3-0, games like Notre Dame is getting ready to play at Ohio State to start the year, sometimes they can have an outsized impact on a team's season. If Notre Dame goes over to Ohio State and gets blistered, that can have an impact on their psyche and how they feel about the entire season, how they feel about themselves. We don't know how they would be feeling at that point. If they go up there and play them close, then that's a big confidence booster for them. So those are the kind of things we can't know in advance right now. I don't know if y'all saw or heard Paul Feinbaum going off on the SEC network. Somebody asked if Notre Dame was overrated, and you can imagine how he responded to that. He went on like a 5 or 6 minute tirade about how they always get treated this way. But in the advanced metrics, which don't, they could crayon out the names of the teams, and the formulas would be the same. Notre Dame is in the FPI is ranked 5, and in the SP Plus they're ranked 7. North Carolina's an underdog in the FPI and the S&P Plus, almost a touchdown in S&P Plus. The one other wild card I would mention with Notre Dame is that even though Brian Kelly is, I don't really trust his Southern accent that much. But one thing he was really good at Notre Dame was that staff was good on the headsets, and they didn't lose to teams they were favored to beat, hardly ever. And now they have a different staff. Are they going to be just as good on the headsets as the previous staff was? We'll see. But that's a high watermark to live up to for Marcus Freeman and his staff. Is Notre Dame seldom screwed up a game like that they were favored to win. So I'm going to pick Notre Dame to win this one. I think they'll win it, and I think they'll probably win by a touchdown at least.
Vip, everybody's commenting on your lighting. I think Gregory Hall likes your hotel room.
It's the camera. It's the camera.
Pier 1 setup.
The camera makes everything look better.
It adds years and pounds to us. It makes you look like you're sitting on a movie set over there.
Yeah, this Notre Dame game, this is the game every year where you're looking at the schedule and you're like, maybe if everything goes right, this is the college game day game. There is a couple other games that weekend. It's like Wisconsin at Ohio State, but they're already going to Ohio State for that week 1 Notre Dame game. There's like Arkansas A&M, Clemson at Wake Forest, but ESPN, if Carolina goes into this game 3-0, the Mack Brown factor is going to push maybe game day towards ESPN. Towards Chapel Hill, because they want to promote Mack Brown as much as humanly possible on their programs with the way he could talk. But this Notre Dame team, it's I really like their quarterback, Tyler Buckner. He has some Ian Book to him when you watch their highlights and how he's able to make plays happen with his legs compared to Jack Cohn last year, who was essentially a statue in the pocket. So I think this is a really tough test for the Carolina defense, which I think is going to be significantly improved under Coach Chizik. And then I think they have an NFL type secondary. So I think this is going to be a tough matchup for Carolina all around. So my prediction is game day comes to Chapel Hill. Carolina loses to Notre Dame.
Jason.
Yeah, I actually, again, am pretty much in the same thought process as Taylor here. For one thing, I think it's important to note that even though Kelly left Notre Dame to put on that faux Southern accent at LSU, that's not a new staff. Almost the entire staff stayed in South Bend. So they had their strength coach stayed, offensive coordinator stayed. They hired their defensive coordinator as their head coach. Defensive line coach stayed, running backs coach stayed, cornerbacks coach stayed, tight ends coach stayed, and their safeties coach stayed. That's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 position coaches plus the coordinator who got elevated. So that's 7 coaches from that 10 coach staff that stayed. So, that's still going to be a lot of continuity in terms of what they're doing in South Bend. And I think that program has got more overall depth of talent in terms of being able to absorb, some of the problems that Carolina has had in camp. For example, losing a guy like Antoine Green, I think that's a big factor in this game. I think the thing that I'm looking at in this game is, who are Carolina's game breakers going to be? Who are the playmakers going to be that are going to make the plays necessary to beat a team like Notre Dame? Because in order to beat Notre Dame, Carolina is going to have really good play from their quarterbacks for sure, but they're also going to have to hit some big plays that don't come from Josh Downs. And that's going to have to come from some guys that are out wide as well, because Notre Dame's going to be able to load the box. They're going to have some good players up front. So that's really where I come down to it. I think this is a game that Carolina can win, but it's not a game that I would pick them to win at this stage. So I'm going to go with Notre Dame winning this game, and then about a 0.35 chance of, so about 35% chance of, or 30%, I'll say 30% chance of Carolina winning it. So 30% chances of Carolina winning this game.
Greg, what do you think to round out the Notre Dame talk? I believe it when I see it. And I just remember or whenever it was, they flat out shut down Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. And then was it last year or year before last, they had losing offensive linemen didn't matter. I mean, everybody can talk about how Notre Dame folds up shop in bowl games or whatever, but to Buck's point, they don't lose games like this. Very rarely. What happens?
Yeah, the interesting thing there, and I think Buck makes a really good point. As good as Brian Kelly was, both with the headset on as well as developing talent, he wasn't a great recruiter. Solid, but at Notre Dame, you expect better than top 10 classes. He had a lot of classes that are like 15th, 14th, 10th, 9th. Marcus Freeman has elevated that. And I think that right now they're like third in the country in terms of what they've done recruiting-wise. So what is the transition? Is Marcus just a better recruiter than Brian Kelly, but not the coach? That remains to be seen. And I think that's a big part of how this early season plays out. But it also speaks to kind of what Jason's talking about. This is not the type of team, and it hasn't been, that's going to blow a decent opponent off the field. They're good enough and they're solid enough to not beat themselves. And that's what we saw last year. Does Marcus Freeman continue that? And if so, and if Tyler Buckner is the quarterback they think he can become, because he is a special kid, like Taylor said, he's basically just run first as a freshman, and now they think he's the full package. Well, if those two things work in Notre Dame's favor, then it's kind of like the App State game, where if Notre Dame plays their A game, Carolina is not going to be able to beat them. But if those things don't work in Notre Dame's favor, then Carolina has a chance, like Jason said. But I do think Notre Dame, because they return so much talent, they got a lot of good players, especially across the defense. I think it's going to be a tough game for Carolina to win, even though that's at home. So I've got Notre Dame winning this one.
Yeah, what you got, John? Adam and Ross both have Carolina losing to Notre Dame to drop to 3-1. Like I said, I believe it when I see it. I remember 2008. It remains one of the greatest games I've ever seen, and my personal favorite game in Kenan Stadium for multiple reasons. But Notre Dame also was Jimmy Clausen at quarterback, and he was not good at times. But I'm going to put Notre Dame beats Carolina, but close, very close. John, you're last.
I'm going to build on Jason's point. I just remember Kyron Williams last year, that run, that back-breaking run that he had. I think it was 91 yards or something like that. There's a different level of talent and depth on Notre Dame's roster. I think they win this game in Chapel Hill, so I'm putting it as a loss for UNC.
People can't boo me for picking a loss if you give me hell for picking them 12-0, man. There's got to be a middle ground. Let's go. Virginia Tech comes to town the first week in October. Buck, I'll let you start it off here. This is after last season, I would think Mack Brown and Carolina and all those players owe this Virginia Tech team a little bit. Obviously, a different group of Hokies that have come. But, yeah, to the point about the crowd, I said it last week, I think, Carolina was shook at Virginia Tech badly when that crowd started rocking. Carolina needs to return to favor. Buck, do they against Virginia Tech? I guess October 1st.
Well, for starters, I think we probably ought to skip this game, all of us, because I think we all got it wrong last year.
Don't know what
Greg Barnes, I don't mean to call you out at all, but, you were pretty enthusiastic about North Carolina was going to go up there and just beat the
I was. Very
yeah.
much so.
I very much regret reversing my pick because if you remember, I had this game and then I just decided at the very last minute, just change it and should have kept it.
I was walking into Lane Stadium telling people the Hokies had no shot. Two plays in, I turned to somebody next to me and said, "We got a game. We got a game."
Yeah.
I was
Just
telling
goes
students
to show you the quality geniuses we have here at IC doing this show.
it's getting hot.
We know that North Carolina lost to Virginia Tech off the top, but here's the things that are also true. I mean, their offense was horrible last year, and I can't see it getting any better this year. And even though, this goes back to the old thing about the good news is the bad news is that they have only 51% returning production on the team, and the good news is that they only have 51%. And they're coming off of 10 days of rest against North Carolina, though that's in their favor. Their quarterback situation, I'm not sure that it's settled yet, but I think they're going with that Grant Wells guy from Marshall.
Yeah, they just named him.
Yep.
Yeah, he's thrown 22 picks in the last 2 seasons
At Marshall.
That's a lot of picks to be throwing. So we'll see how that works out for him. North Carolina is a huge favorite again in this game. They're a 2-touchdown favorite, FPI and SP+. But remember, we managed to blow it against Florida State last year at home, and we were a couple of touchdown favorite over that team. And the final point I'll leave you with here from my portion of the program is, as much as we talk about beating Virginia Tech and blah, 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 they're 14-4 against UNC since they come to the ACC. North Carolina has won 4 ball games against this guy. I'm still picking North Carolina because this is supposed to be a horrible team. North Carolina's playing at home. We'll see how it goes. But I'm prepared to wash the egg off my face when after this game is over with this season.
Vip, do you think you will be turning to somebody beside you going, uh-oh, again this year?
Only because it's not in Blacksburg. Yes, I think I will. In year 4 for Mack Brown at home, these are games that North Carolina just has to win. Over the past 3 years, Virginia Tech's average recruiting ranking, 45th compared to Carolina's at 20th. North Carolina has significantly more talent across the board. This is a game where I think North Carolina has the talent edge. The coaches have to get this game over the finish line. I'm going to give the edge to Carolina going up against a first-year staff trying to figure it out. I think the fact that this game is in Chapel Hill is a huge benefit for North Carolina, where anything kind of goes in Blacksburg. I've learned that once they kind of get rocking with Enter Sandman, all bets are off. But I think North Carolina wins this game. It just comes down to too much talent, and these are the games that Mack Brown has to start winning.
I agree 100%. It kind of reminds me of the whiteout game. I guess that was 2012, where Gio kind of went nuts against Virginia Tech and Carolina was able to win. Greg Barnes, does the confidence that you exuded prior to kickoff last year, does it carry over this year for this one?
Well, let's talk about that, because if you look at this series, like Buck mentioned, Virginia Tech's 14-4, and you look at the NC State series, State's won 10 of the last 15 in the series. I don't think there's any question that Carolina has recruited better than both of those programs. But both of those programs take pride in out-toughing Carolina in football. And by and large, they've done it over the last decade and a half, if not longer. So at some point, Carolina has to understand that talent's just not enough. And when you're better than your opponent, you've got to take it to them and not just absorb blows, which is what Carolina has done too often, especially in this series. Brent Pry is going to come in wanting to bring back that lunch pail mentality. If we may not be great this year, but we're going to fight like dogs on defense, and we're going to be just good enough offensively to stay in some of these games. I think that's their recipe this year. And so we talk about growth as a program. Carolina's got to be able to match that. They've got to be able to win the games that they're supposed to win. And I think this is the first example of that. I agree that with this game being in Chapel Hill, Carolina should win it. But they got to come to play, and they got to play physical and not get beat at the line of scrimmage, which is what happened last year in Blacksburg.
Yep. Jason Staples, somebody asked on the message board, Drew Krebs, shout out Drew, is this game more of a must-win than the App game? Which one of those games is more of a must-win? I think App is, personally, because Virginia Tech is actually a big-time ACC school. But anyway, what happens Virginia Tech, Carolina, Jason?
I think this one is it boils down to Virginia Tech having a pretty bare cupboard, frankly. I mean, a couple of the guys that gave Carolina the most trouble last year are gone. In particular, Trey. I can't. His name is
Turner.
Trey Turner. He was a guy that we talked about in the preview last year. That he's the one guy you couldn't let beat you, and he did some things against him last year, and they were able to make some plays down the field last year against the corners that really changed that game. I don't see a whole lot of those guys on their roster. And I think, you can bring the lunch pail defense back as much as you want, but if the talent's not there, it's not going to matter very much. So ultimately for me, this is a talent issue. I'm not sure that Virginia Tech has an ACC level quarterback on their roster. And I think Carolina has 3 of them, 2 that are ready to play. So, I've got Carolina winning this game. I have this as an 85% chance of Carolina winning, which means, well into the double digits is my expectation, somewhere, 17-point win area.
If somebody is going to have a big game,
Jason,
Tech,
you made it under the wire.
That's been going since we started this whole round.
If somebody is going to have a big game for Virginia Tech, it's going to be Stephen Gosnell, just because he transfers from UNC.
Just because it would be.
Yeah.
or
the Stephen Gosnell game.
Exactly. I can't believe Trey. I was just looking it up. Trey Turner was an undrafted free agent. That dude was good.
Yeah, he's a really good player.
And nobody, I think he went to the Vikings, undrafted free agent. John B. Ross and Adam both had this as a win for North Carolina. What's your pick here?
I am going win for North Carolina as well. I agree with Jason, and to build on his point about the cupboard being bare, go look at their 2020 recruiting class. They had the Texas to VT movement. Their top 2 players from that recruiting class from Texas have both transferred out, and they don't have much else in that recruiting class. I think UNC has a better roster. I'm picking a UNC win. How about you, Tommy?
I think Carolina wins this game. It's in Kenan Stadium, and it's one of those, as long as there's not some
Monsoon.
weird. Yeah, absolutely. And to Greg's point, that monsoon game proves that point. They just beat the hell out of Carolina in the rain in that game. And Carolina was a pretty good football team. And the toughness factor, this is a game for Mack Brown and his team that if they're going to preach that they don't just look good coming off the bus or in the airport, this is the kind of game you got to get it done. You got to just wear out the Hokies up and down the field, because Virginia Tech has been the big bad team, and the fan bases can talk about how the recruiting stinks and all that, but at 14-4 speaks for itself. This is the year Mack Brown's got to flip that. Let's move on to the next show. And look, this one's going to be a long show. It's already 9:43 on the East Coast. We're halfway through the season, not even halfway through the season. Don't forget to support Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Now, and I'm not going to do the full read yet because I want to do it after we talk about the Miami game. But let's go Miami. Taylor, Miami game. Carolina wants to – all Carolina fans remember what happened down in the Orange Bowl or at Hard Rock Stadium a few weeks before the Orange Bowl a couple of years ago or whenever it was. But this Miami team, are they legit this year? I do think Tyler Van Dyke's a good quarterback. Is this a game that Carolina has a chance in, A, and B, is this a game that Mack Brown can step up and say, hey, my guys can win on the road as well?
I know Buck is a big trends guy where he kind of has to see it before it happens, but I have to admit I'm falling for the banana in the tailpipe. I think Miami is going to be pretty good this year, mainly because Mario Cristobal is not Manny Diaz. I think that's a significant improvement for the University of Miami. Tommy, you mentioned Tyler Van Dyke. I think he's arguably the best quarterback in the conference from what we've seen. I thought the Miami team looked drastically different when he was the one running the offense for like the last 2/3 of the season, and then you bring in Cristobal, and it just they just have a. I know it always feels like Miami's good in August. They're the clear front runners always, but with Cristobal, there at least feels like there's some substance behind there. When Manny Diaz was kind of in over his head almost from the jump. So I've North Carolina losing this game in Miami.
Jason, flip the switch, Buck. Jason Staples, your pick at Miami. And you're muted. There's not too many times where Jason Staples can't be heard.
This to me is a tough one. I'm not sold actually on Cristobal this season for Miami making that big of a difference, because really Cristobal's sort of the thing that he's done best as a coach is recruit. And he's not always had the best on-field results with the teams that he's actually had. I mean, you go out to Oregon and them getting bullied multiple times by Utah the last couple of years. I mean, you start to see some of the stuff that he did, and look at the quarterback that's at San Diego right now for the Chargers, and you realize, wait a second, why didn't he have a better college career? Oh wait, look who his head coach was in those years. So, I do think Van Dyke might be the best quarterback in the ACC, but I'm a little bit wait and see on what they're going to do offensively. I mean, I know Josh Gaddis is a good mind offensively, but I know they're going to want to pound the football, and I'm not sure that roster is really set to do it. And last year, Van Dyke had a really good receiving core, and this year, I'm not sure how good their receiving core is actually going to be. So there are reasons to doubt this Miami team, but at the same time, there are also reasons to be concerned about this Carolina team. I mean, you can say the same thing about some of Carolina's receiver depth minus Josh Downs. So ultimately, I think a lot of things kind of line up to where, a lot of the same criticisms that you can make about Miami, you can make about the same offense and so on with UNC and some of the questions in the secondary for UNC that they had. So ultimately, I think this is a Miami win. I'm going to go with that, with it being in Miami. I think it's about a 35% chance for Carolina to win this one. That's kind of where I'm resting. But I think this is one of the games with the biggest delta between in terms of possibilities. It could go a lot of different ways based on how that new coaching staff does things and how that fits with the current personnel.
Greg, aren't Miami and Carolina virtually the same team? A lot of hype. Very rarely do they live up to it. Is that fair?
Yeah. So let's discuss that for a second. So Miami, the issue with Miami has been that they've recruited at this incredible level for the most part forever. And then you've got guys, and I made a note to throw Al Golden's name out at Jason during the Notre Dame discussion, and I failed, so I feel bad about that. Al Golden's the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame now, which is hysterical to me. But you have guys like Al Golden as your coach at Miami. And in hindsight, you're like, well, yeah, it makes sense that he didn't have a lot of success because he's just not that good of a coach as a head coach. And same thing can be said about Manny Diaz and Randy Shannon and these guys that have come along the path. If the only thing holding Miami back is coaches, I mean, geez, look at what they have. Cristobal, yeah, but Josh Gaddis, right? We're in the top offensive minds in the country last year.
That's Wake Forest, Josh Gaddis, right?
Yeah,
Insane
absolutely.
guy.
And Michigan was great last year. Kevin Steele, defensive coordinator. Charlie Strong, who took over for Mack Brown at Texas years ago, is linebackers coach. They have pumped money into this coaching staff. Will it take them some time? Sure. But I think they can hit the ground running. I think there's enough good pieces here for Mario to be able to do what he wants to do. And talking about Justin Herbert, kind of what Mario's always wanted to do is kind of like the Butch Davis approach, where you don't want your offense to do too much crazy, and you want your defense to be really good, and the offense kind of to complement your defense. You could have a discussion whether or not that still works in college football. Mario thinks it does, and that's what they're going to be like this year. They really think that defense can be good. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch Miami. The fact that this is the last year of the Coastal, I think it's kind of a sad thing because I like the rivalry that Carolina and Miami have built over the years. But because this game is down in Miami Gardens, I do have Miami winning this one, and I think Miami is going to be better than some people think. I think they're going to get smoked by Texas A&M early, and they close the season with some hard games against Clemson and Pitt. But I think this is a team that can win 10 games.
Interesting take, Buck. Somebody posted in the chat if that was Carolina's, and I'm paraphrasing, if that were Carolina's coaching staff, we, meaning the Carolina fan base, would be super confident in their abilities. What do you think about Carolina, Miami? October 8th, down in Miami Gardens.
Well, first thing I'm going to say is in terms of coaching, I think they had a really good offensive coordinator and have had a really good offensive coordinator for the last 2-3 years. Red Lashley is probably as good as it gets in the FBS. So, they have hired some good coaches. And when we talk about whether or not the hype is real, this go around, we hear it every year. But to Greg's point, they have thrown a ton of cash at this program. I think Cristobal is like in the top 10 of coaches' salaries in the FBS now. So, and I think Tyler Van Dyke is for real. And it's a little bit funny that they're ranked 16th in the nation. They're coming off a 7-5 season, but they did close the season out well. So they got that going for them. Here's a couple of things that I think are interesting. One is North Carolina holds a series record against the Hurricanes. Most people would not guess that. They're 12-11 against the Hurricanes, series record. They've won 3 in a row against Miami, and they're in the last 10 years they're 3-2 against Miami at Miami. So there's something about Miami that gets North Carolina's juices rolling. But at the same time, that they're like a touchdown favorite at home. I think that probably, is the FPI and the SP Plus are telling you something there. And the one wild card I think is that Texas A&M game is actually 3 weeks before the North Carolina game. And Jason Staples has made the point multiple times that if Miami ever really suffers a, excruciating beatdown like they used to always get from Miami, they're no more good the rest of the year. So we'll see how that goes. I'm still making this a loss for North Carolina. I think they're going to lose. I don't know if that Miami will cover. Because I do think that Cristobal is going to want to get in a rock fight down there with North Carolina. We'll see how that works out for him. But I got Miami by a touchdown.
I'll go ahead and get mine in. So I got to find some losses. I remember Jason Staples talking about that last year. I got to find some losses. But I've kind of talked myself into thinking Carolina can get this one down there in Miami. And John, for the record, Ross and Adam both have it as a loss to Miami.
Don't do it, Tommy. Don't do it. Not after last year.
The one thing about last year is it was like
do it, Tommy.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Tommy. I'm with Jason. Don't do
Watching that game last year, it was like somebody needs to turn the clock up to like time and a half because Miami's going to win this game if this game goes any longer. And with the ball bounce off somebody's butt and off somebody's head and said Gray or whoever enters, I want to do it, guys.
Don't do it.
I mean,
Oh,
What the hell, Tommy? 12-0. 12-0.
no,
Wow.
I'm not. I've already picked a loss.
11-1.
11 and 1.
11-1. Yeah.
2015.
Tempering expectations.
Yes.
Yeah, this is we're trying to bring down. And I'm torn, guys. Go ahead, John. What you gonna pick?
Noted optimist Tommy Ashley.
This is locked in, Tommy. You can't change it. You're stuck
Oh,
to
you put it up
Clemson.
there already? Okay,
It's
yeah, I'll
locked
own it.
in.
Carolina wins. If Carolina wins this game, they probably lost one of those first three. But anyway, go, John. Fill it out, and then let's move on.
For me, this is about quarterback play. The last 3 seasons, UNC has had better quarterbacks than Miami. I think that switches this year. Tyler Van Dyke is a great quarterback. I have a UNC loss here.
That is a great point. That's why we got John B on the thing. Gregory Hall started the producer / great analysis thing, and John is keeping it going. Carolina at Duke. Let's do this one quick because I'm going to do a Johnny T-shirt read after that. Carolina at Duke. Does anybody think Duke has a chance? Greg, I know you wanted to mention the new coaching staff, but you as well at Duke. Does Elko make a difference at Duke? Greg, go first.
I think he does eventually. I think he's a good defensive mind. And they need somebody like that at Duke. Is that going to happen this year? No. Carolina wins this one pretty easy.
Buck,
Yeah,
you agree?
I agree. I'm looking forward to seeing somebody besides David Cutcliffe on the Duke sideline. And I'm guessing most of the Duke fans and players would agree with that. I think he was a good guy and a good coach, but I'm just tired of looking at him. It's time for another new face over there in Durham. And North Carolina is, and in SP Plus, they're almost a 3-touchdown favorite. This is going to be a horrible team Duke has, and watch them beat North Carolina over there in Durham. And
Well, I will give a shout out to Clayton kid Jacob Monk, who's one of their offensive linemen. That's a good kid, and nephew of the late Quincy Monk and son of Stanley Monk that played at Duke as well. But yeah, Carolina whips Duke. I can't believe how many times David Cutcliffe beat Carolina, to be honest with you. And there was once upon a time, I think it was 20-some wins straight, wasn't it, Buck? Carolina Duke they were close. There were some weird games, but Carolina just never lost.
Mack Brown's signature win almost in 2019, except for South Carolina, was beating Duke with Chaz Surratt catching the pop pass there at the end. I mean,
that signified to me that Cutcliffe was done. It was time to go to pasture when they had run it all the way down the field, and then they wanted to do that. Anyway, Taylor, Jason, John, anybody thinking Duke makes this a game?
No, I've got this as a 90% plus win probability for the Heels.
John, everybody
all
else
you need to know about this Duke team is they posted a video on their social media of one of their players holding up a sign saying, "Come to the spring game, please watch us." I think that's about where the program is at this stage.
was this note written in crayon?
It was like black marker. It was one of the players.
Oh,
They sent him out there to
okay.
do that. Poor guy.
They could probably have their blue-white game at midfield, and that would help some of the crowd. Maybe they should do that their first game instead of play. Carolina goes through Duke easily, I think. Ross and Adam both have it as a win. Into the bye week, Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com, sponsors of Inside Carolina, and InsideCarolina.com. 10% off your order if you are a premium subscriber. Take advantage of it. They got all the gear. They're alumni owned and operated. They've done it for years on East Franklin Street. You need to go see them. I was in there the other day, stepped in, shopped. Great time to see them. Football season is here. Get all your gear. Every sport you need. Women's soccer, they've got some gear for that as well. Support them all. Support Johnny T-shirt. Support all the teams. And support Inside Carolina and help Inside Carolina support them. National guys pay the bills. It's about 10 o'clock on the East Coast. We'll be right back with the second half of the prediction season. We're back. It's Inside Carolina's prediction season. I got too many screens going on. I got some coffee in the cup. I'm going to start with Greg Barnes here. Greg, I think Carolina has Is it a bye after the Duke game? And then Pitt comes to town. This is an interesting matchup. Carolina should have beat Pitt last year. I think we'd agree with that. Somebody should have been watching the weather, and they did not see the monsoon coming. But Pitt is a good football team. They've always been a good football team. And now they get the USC transfer, Greg. How does this game shape out? I think this is one of those games where Carolina's got to step up. You want to bully the bully. This is another game to do it, I think.
Yeah, we talk about Miami being overhyped and overrated year in and year out, and that's true. But what you can say about Pitt over the last really 6 or 7 years under Pat Narduzzi is they've been underhyped. If you look at where they've been picked in the preseason ACC poll versus where they finish higher every single year, I think the last 6 years. Narduzzi's a good coach. He's not a great coach. He says a lot of crazy things, which is why I kind of like him. He's you never know what he's going to say. And he drives people nuts on the sideline the way he complains. But the guy's a great defensive mind. Was at Michigan State, took him a while at Pitt. They returned pretty much everybody on the defensive side of the ball. And I understand the concern about Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison leaving and Mark Whipple. But, I mean, Pat's been blasting Mark Whipple this offseason, saying he threw the ball too much, which makes it entertaining. But they return all 5 starting offensive linemen. You mentioned Slovis coming in. Great freshman year, kind of hit or miss last couple years. Got a really good core of running backs. They got some wide receivers that they like, including a transfer that come in. I think Pitt's right there with Miami as one of the 2 best teams in the Coastal this year. I had Carolina 3rd in the division. With this game being in Chapel Hill, it really is, for me, a toss-up. Tommy, you mentioned having to find losses, having to find wins. I've got Carolina losing this game, and I'll explain more later, but that's kind of wise. I think this is a true toss-up, but I'm going to put Carolina down for a loss because I do think Pitt's going to be pretty good.
It's interesting with watching Pitt over the years. They had James Conner, and they were running up and down the field against Carolina in one of the Fedora years. I think it's the Trubisky game. I could be wrong. But then they decided to start throwing the ball, and Carolina ends up winning the games. It's interesting to me that Narduzzi now wants to get back to the ground and pound type deal. Jason, I'll come to you next on this Pitt game. I mean, and I love the Vip spotlight there. With Vip, it almost looks like you've got that CBS camera angle where they blur the back, and then the person looks like it's almost in 3D.
It is focused in on me.
That is fascinating. Buck, I think we all need that swag and that gear. Jason, though, I'm going to go with you. Pitt and Carolina, it's a game that Carolina can certainly lose, but they've shown at home at least they can win these type.
Yeah, this is I have this as basically a toss-up game. I think this is going to be the best chance that Carolina actually has in this is because Narduzzi is going back to that ground and pound. And I think actually, as much as he disliked working with Whipple made them better by not being the guy that did everything that Narduzzi wanted to do offensively. So I think in that respect, they're probably going to take a little bit of a step back offensively. So this is a game that Carolina absolutely can win. And with it being in Chapel Hill, they really probably should win this game at this stage of the season. But I'm searching for losses at this point. And I think Carolina is going to turn in another loss somewhere on the schedule. And this is one I have marked down as one of their more likely losses. So I'm going to pick this as a loss for Carolina in Chapel Hill. But here's the twist. I have this as a loss, but I have it as a 60% chance of Carolina winning it. So I need to find a loss in terms of where they're going to wind up on the season. But this is a game that I think, all things being equal, in a vacuum, they probably should win this game. I need to find a loss here. So a loss, but a 60% chance of winning the game. So that's my win confidence, as it were.
I think you just blew my brain. I'm not. Yeah, Vip, can you explain that? They're going to win. They're going to lose, but I believe they'll win by 60%. Yeah, help me, Vip.
I can't explain that, but as far as my prediction, I think this is a toss-up. I agree with almost what everybody has said so far, but I think this has been a bad offseason for Pitt. You lose Kenny Pickett, you lose Jordan Addison, you lose Mark Whipple. Mark Whipple 2-0 as the offensive coordinator against Carolina. Without Mark Whipple, Narduzzi 0-4. He lost to two really, really bad Fedora year teams. And I think that part is sticking in my head. And I'm the opposite of Greg. Greg likes Narduzzi, I think. I'm over him. He is so smug. I can't stand seeing him on the sidelines.
He's no charmer.
I have the quote about Mark Whipple. Our old offensive coordinator had no desire to run the ball. Everybody knew it. He was stubborn. Wake Forest was 118th in run defense, and we threw the ball every down. When we ran it for 10 yards, but that wasn't good enough. They won that game 45-21 to win a conference title. What is he talking about? I'm picking Carolina just for that quote, though.
Buck, I believe I've saved you for last.
Yeah, and I think my eyes glazed over there at some point while you guys were talking about. To Greg's point, one thing about Greg is he's big on
Football guy.
If a team hasn't done it before, then you can't pick them. You can't pick that team if they haven't shown you they can do it in the past. Pitt hadn't won a ball game in UNC since 1982. 40 years they haven't won a game at Chapel Hill. And that escapes Greg Barnes in this one particular instance for whatever reason. But that was an interesting game in 82, by the way. Pitt was number 1. Tar Heels were number 5 that year. UNC lost. Spoiler alert. So anyway, the thing about Pitt is, yes, they lost Kenny Pickett. Yes, they lost Jordan Addison. But they're number 31 in returning production elsewhere. So they're bringing back a really experienced team. And, this is another game. This is a game that, for the first time in my memory, this happens 3 times on this schedule, which speaks a little bit to, what most people don't realize, that this really is a tough schedule for UNC. It's like 11th in the nation in terms of toughness. UNC is a 3-point favorite in the FPI, but a 0.3 underdog in the S&P. That happens twice more in this schedule. It's very, very rare that you see the FPI go one way and the SP Plus go the other way, both ESPN products. But, I think, unless they've done it before, I've got to go with the tradition and pick UNC to win this game. I maybe give it North Carolina a 51% chance to win this game. So put it down as a W.
Carolina ain't losing this game. I mean, shout out to the Pitt fan that's in our chat. It is a pleasure to have you. Come on to Kenan Stadium and come hang out in the Bowls lot prior to this one. But Carolina's going to beat Pittsburgh. For the fact that Jason mentioned and y'all mentioned, if they want to try to run it all the time against this Carolina defense, I think that plays into Carolina's hands. The only question here is how many headsets does Narduzzi break during the course of this one? And we'll leave it at that. Adam Smith, Inside Carolina beat writer, has Carolina beating Pitt. Ross Martin has Carolina losing to Pitt. John Bauman, you are the last one to pick on this one.
I think this is a tight game, as everyone has said. I think it's also a little bit of an interesting case study, this Pitt team. Football being a top-down, star-driven sport. They lost their biggest star this offseason in Jordan Addison. Or do you trust the returning production, as Buck was talking about? Do you trust their veteran experience? I could go either way on this game. I'm going to go with the loss.
Interesting take. About split on that. Carolina goes to Virginia after that week. Greg Barnes, when was the last time Mack Brown won at Virginia?
I'd have to look it up.
Never is the answer.
Yeah, I would assume never.
Buck, let's start with you with Virginia and Carolina. Brennan Armstrong, I mean, that dude, that game at Carolina, he's slinging it everywhere. He looked amazing. He stays healthy. He's a solid quarterback. They've got that three-headed snake that they play. But Matt Brown's got to win these games at some point. If Carolina's going to be more than an 8-4 football team, it starts at Virginia, right, Buck?
Well, let's hope it starts before that. But yeah, I hope he wins the Virginia game. That's his own personal Charlottesville curse. But this is a team that is basically the exact opposite statistically from Pitt. Even though the Cavaliers, which is something that everybody will end up talking about, is they're 125th in returning production. They bring back almost nobody. And they lost almost their entire offensive line. I think it's 4 out of 5 or so.
I think they're replacing all 5 starters.
Yes. So their offensive line completely gone. But on the flip side, they bring back Brennan Armstrong, Wicks, the receiver, Billy Kemp, Malachi Fields, Kiton Thompson. They bring back all their skill players basically, except they didn't really have many running backs to start with. So they're losing a lot of their high-end production guys, but they're bringing back most of their returning production. They're not bringing back any returning production. Sorry, 125th. So the Tar Heels are favored in Charlottesville. Won't be the first time they went up there favored and lost, but that's something. And it's North Carolina is in between Miami and Pitt on the schedule, but all 3 of those games are played in Scott Stadium. Now, I'm going to pick Mack to break the Charlottesville curse. I've got North Carolina winning one here, but I think it'll be a close game.
Vip, Virginia experience up in Charlottesville. What happens this year?
All their returning production seems to be their skill guys. A name that hasn't even been mentioned, Lavelle Davis Jr. He missed the 21 season due to, I think it was an ACL injury. And I have his stats right here. He was 7th in the nation among freshmen with 515 yards, tied for 5th in the nation among freshmen with 5 receiving touchdowns, only player in the nation with 500-plus receiving yards on 20 or few receptions. So he's a big play threat. This Virginia offense, if they could figure out that offensive line, they have a lot of big play potential. And I think that's where this North Carolina defense is going to be susceptible to giving up the big plays. From the practices I've seen, I have a lot of question marks with the secondary and their ability to kind of keep plays in front of them. But I think on the flip side of that, that's Virginia's biggest weakness too on defense. So my only advice for this game would be to take the over. This is a game where it's like whatever the over is, I would say bet it. If it's 75, I'm still taking the over. I think this is going to be points. But I do think North Carolina wins. I guess I only started really following Carolina football once I got into Carolina. I don't have these nightmare memories of going to Charlottesville. Like when I think of going to Charlottesville, Quinshaw Davis has like 25 catches his true freshman year, or the Mitch Trubisky, they're just running like reverses and throwing the ball deep to Bug Howard. I don't have these scars that I think that you guys have built up from seeing North Carolina and Charlottesville. So I'm going North Carolina wins.
How old were you in '96, Vip?
2.
Say so.
That would be why.
Yeah.
In New York, too.
Oh, God.
Fun fact, where was the kid that returned the interception in 1996? Where did he go to high school?
Raleigh somewhere. Was it Millbrook?
Ravenscroft.
Okay.
Unbelievable. Greg, Carolina at Virginia.
Jonathan Leach is a tackle for Virginia, and he has started 2 games in his career, and he is the only offensive lineman on the roster that has started a game. So a lot of work to be done up front. They've got 5 transfers that they're counting on playing snaps along the defensive front. So yes, they've got a great quarterback. They got some good players at the skill positions, as Taylor mentioned and Buck alluded to. But I mean, what do you have in the trenches? And Bronco alluded to it last year, and Tony Elliott's talked about it as well, that they really kind of lost their compass defensively. And he was trying to do the Matt Campbell 3-3-5 last year, and they kind of rushed it and didn't have enough pieces, and it kind of fell apart. So I think this is a rebuild, even though Tony Elliott's got some good players offensively. If you can't win in the trenches and you don't trust what you have in the trenches, you're not going to be able to win a lot of games. And I think at this point in the season, Carolina should be feeling pretty good about what they have defensively. And while there will be a lot of points scored, I don't see how Virginia can slow down Carolina enough on that side of the ball. I got Carolina winning this one pretty healthily up in Charlottesville.
Who we got? Jason, have you picked Pitt?
I have not.
Virginia Tech. Virginia.
But Greg basically just said pretty much everything I was going to say. I'm not quite as confident as Greg is on this, but I think, again, most of the time games come down to the quarterback position in the trenches, and they've got the quarterback position, but I don't think they have the trenches on either side of the ball, and I think that's the determining factor here. I think Mack finally gets his win in Charlottesville, and this is one of those games where I've got it close enough that UVA could win this game, but I've got Carolina winning this, and about a 65% chance of winning this game.
John, for the record, Adam Smith, loss at Virginia. Ross Martin, win at Virginia. I'm going to go win at Virginia, pound the over. Like Taylor said, I think Brennan Armstrong's a good quarterback. Somebody said he's a pro-style quarterback. I remember him being pretty mobile at times, running around, slinging it against Carolina last year. I just think that I think the curse and the whatever you want to call it stuff is real. And it's one of those things where they've got to do it. They need a Dwight Jones type performance from somebody where he went, close to 250 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. I think Carolina gets the win at Virginia. But again, it's one of those ones that I'll believe when I see it. What do you think, John?
I trusted Slagle. He said Staples with a 75% chance. Did you say 65%, Jason?
I said 65.
Oh,
he's making a joke about about the prior pick.
I trusted Slagle. He let me down there. My pick for this one is a UNC win, although I do want to give a shout out to Kiton Thompson from Virginia, who's my favorite player, probably on any ACC school because he plays like 6 different positions. He's very fun to watch. Can you give me Ross and Adams as well?
Adams got it as a loss, Ross Martin as a win.
This is the Noah Taylor game.
Oh, yeah, that's right. How does Noah Taylor play going home?
Hey, John, the fun thing about Kiton Thompson is that Bronco listed him as football player.
Well, they had 3 guys as football players.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't he 99? Or they don't have a 9? That's great too. He's like, what position you play? All of them. What's your number? 99. Let's go.
He's a 5th year as well, so he might be like 26 years old at this point. Who knows?
He's one of them guys. He's played every position on the field, like at least one game. All right, this game coming up in Week 11 for North Carolina. And Greg, I'll start with you first on this one. This is one of those ones where everybody's healthy. I'm picking Wake Forest without question. It's time for them to finally get over that against Carolina. They have literally snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory twice against Carolina, in pretty incredible fashion both ways. But Greg, it all depends, I think, on Hartman's availability and Hartman's status, and I think he'll probably be back. But is he the same guy? Because I think he's I think he is the best quarterback in the conference when healthy.
I agree, and I think with the game being that late in the season, there is expectation that he will return. Will he have enough games under his belt to kind of get up to his previous form is the question. And yeah, I think it was 17 points they were down in the third quarter, and then a year later, 21 points they were down in the third quarter. And Sam Howell did Sam Howell things and led Carolina to victories in both games, which is just ridiculous. I agree with you. I think this is a game that's going to be tough for Carolina. If Hartman's healthy, Wake Forest offense will be jacked. It'll be one of the best in the country. Brad Lambert, he did great things at Charlotte, building that program. Did great things at Marshall as well as at Purdue. Clawson's brought him back to Wake Forest to re-energize that defense, because that defense was really bad last year and really the year before. So I think that defense will be a lot better. They do have a lot of veteran pieces coming back. I think Wake's good. I think the Atlantic Division has 3 really good teams. That's a better division than the Coastal this year. And so I got Wake Forest winning this game against the Tar Heels.
Vip, what you got?
Yeah, I agree with Greg. I think Sam Hartman is the difference in this game. I made a note of it. Like, you go back to last year, and that's a game North Carolina probably should lose before Sam Howell starts doing Sam Howell things. And it's just like Clawson has Wake Forest going to like 7 straight bowl games. They have no business really being that good for their enrollment and for their history in the conference. I think he always gets a ton out of his team. You look at his team every year, the narrative is how old they are. And it's just like redshirt seniors after redshirt seniors ready to play. I have North Carolina losing this game at Wake Forest. Just, it goes back to if Sam Hartman's healthy, I think they have the quarterback edge, which is kind of unfair because North Carolina's quarterbacks really haven't had the chance to show much yet. But you have to find losses somewhere in the schedule, and I'm going loss at Wake.
Jason, what do you think? I mean, we talk about how experience and old guys or good old guys are better than good young guys and all that. Wake Forest has always had that. I do find it interesting, though, that COVID has sort of wizened up or oldened up some teams not named Wake Forest. Carolina's got some old guys on the roster now, some COVID year guys. But Wake Forest, Sam Hartman, whether or not he plays week 11 in Winston, what you got?
So this is a toss-up game for me. I've got it a 50% win probability, but I'm looking for losses. And if there's a game where I think they're just in terms of matchup wise and all of that, I'm not real comfortable. This is one of those because I think Wake Forest is going to be able to score. Now, I do think Wake Forest defense is sneaky bad. They weren't very good defensively last year, and you could see that in what Carolina was able to do against them offensively last year. But I think this is one of those games where, again, I'm looking for losses on the season in terms of getting to the final record that I think they're likely to get to. And this is basically a coin flip. It's at Wake Forest, and Wake Forest has a really good, experienced quarterback. So I'm going to put this down as a loss and 50%, or you could say, how about 49% win probability on this, just to make that a loss.
John, just for the record, Adam and Ross both had this as a loss for North Carolina. Buck, you're up. Carolina at Wake. Once upon a time, this was another one of those games that was a gimme Carolina game back in the day. Not so much lately, even though I do think Jason's point about the defense could tip the scales here.
That's certainly a possibility, and I think we're all going to assume that Sam Hartman is back and 100%. If that's true, that changes the complexion of the game. Another road game, and North Carolina has got to turn that road game disaster of 2021 around. They going winless there, so and I think their offense is not just good with Hartman and receivers, but their offensive line is going to be really good as well. So they're not going to be, if they lose, it's not going to be because they suffer in the trenches. It'll be a good matchup for North Carolina's defensive line as well. They're just a decent defense from away from being even better than they were last year. So, last 2 years, these two teams have combined for 225 points.
CFL.
This is another game. Just take the over, whatever it is.
And you know, if you have a game against a team, then every year it's a shootout. You know, sooner or later you're going to be the slowest person on the draw. And so I've got North Carolina losing this one. Who knows? I think it'll be close because the other two games where they combined for 225 points, still close games. So, but one last thought about this. This is the second of the three games where the FPI and the SP Plus disagree. And just to show you how close everybody thinks this game is, Jason said 50%. Well, the FPI favors Wake Forest by a point, and the SP Plus favors North Carolina by 1.3 points. So that's just how close everybody believes this game will be this year. I've got Wake Forest winning that game, though, because I think sooner or later your luck's going to run out. Your luck's going to run out in some of these shootout games.
Yeah, Buck, if there's one thing I know it's shootouts, given your love of Tombstone.
That's absolutely right. I'm your Huckleberry.
I'm your Huckleberry. It's just my game.
I agree with what you said right there, Buck. At some point, the holster sticks a little bit, and I think the Battle of the Sams the last couple of years went to Carolinas, and all things considered and all things being healthy, I think Wake Forest wins this game in Winston. Now, you change the game if Sam Hartman's not playing. So that's my take there. John Bauman, what you got?
Tommy, you were dangerously close there to 9-1 UNC. So you're 8-2 right now. My take is a UNC loss as well, assuming Sam Hartman is fully healthy and himself. I think he's one of the most exciting players to watch in the ACC and has such a command of that offense. Really fun to watch. So I'm picking Wake Forest here.
All right, let's move on. Georgia Tech. And look, I'm going to shout out some people in the chat. Look, if you come into the chat and talk junk about Carolina fans and the people that are in there, you're probably going to get removed from the chat. So just consider the audience and all. We love to have opposing fans in the chat. It is flattering. I personally wouldn't be in the Inside Pitt message board chat, but if you want to come and talk football, that's cool. You just can't talk smack to the fans. Everybody good? We good? Let's go. Georgia Tech. Ross and Adam have this a win. I have this a win. Let's go through this one fairly quickly. But for last year, is there anybody here that would have any problem with picking Carolina winning this game? Vip, you can go first.
This is going to be a win. This is this kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier. Like it's year 4 for Mack Brown. He's been hyping up this coaching staff all off season. That this is the most together they've been. Carolina has a sizable talent advantage. These are the games Carolina has to win. There's too many toss-ups in the schedule to lose a game that should be a layup, and Georgia Tech should be a layup.
Buck, you agree?
Taylor makes an excellent point there. It's something we should talk about more. By my count, North Carolina is playing 6 teams whose the over and under on their wins for the season is 8.5.
Wow.
6 teams that are picked to win 8.5 games or 9 games if you're successful on the over. So when you're facing that many teams that are, I mean, we're not playing any Alabamas or Georgias or any of those teams, but the teams we are playing are teams that are capable of winning 9 games. So when you have a game like Georgia Tech this year or Florida State last year or any number of games where North Carolina has basically crapped the bed against an opponent that they should have easily handled, that doesn't make for a very successful season. And if North Carolina needs a successful season, they need to get there by beating teams like Georgia Tech and beating them the way they're supposed to beat them.
I agree. Greg, John, Staples, are we all in agreement? Carolina wins home against Georgia Tech. I guess the biggest question is Jeff Collins, the coach, when Georgia Tech comes to Chapel Hill November 19th.
Yeah, can I go off on a little bit of a tangent here?
We love Greg Barn tangents.
As a Georgia Tech administration, what are you doing? Like what is the expectation? Listen to this. This is how Georgia Tech's schedule starts. Clemson, Western Carolina, I'll give you that. Ole Miss, at UCF, and at Pitt. And this is how the schedule ends. At Florida State, at Virginia Tech, Miami, at North Carolina, at Georgia.
Collins might be on the beach with a banana daiquiri at that point, though, until the end of the season.
They knew in December that Georgia Tech was going to be lucky to win 4 games this year. So what are you doing? I don't understand that at all. I don't understand. I mean, because if this is his hot seat season, the guy had no chance. No chance.
I agree. So we'll chalk that up as a win for Carolina against Georgia Tech.
This is a bad Georgia Tech team. I mean, the guys on that team that were worth anything left, minus like 2 or 3 guys. So, I mean, I'll just say this. If they lose to this Georgia Tech team, that is a very, very damning thing for the Mack Brown era. So that's this is a 90% game for me. Carolina wins this game.
Right. Wins for everybody. Wins for everybody all around. The only reason those guys didn't leave is the bus was full. They couldn't get a seat on the bus, Jason, leaving town. Look, this is the Inside Carolina Prediction Show. I see Slagle optimism kind of ran out the window last year, Slagle. Now it's the show me state here at the Inside Carolina podcast. And now we're to a little game that involves Carolina and NC State. Friday after Thanksgiving, if you believe the hype, as Carolina fans did last year, State could be pretty good. I don't know where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with Buck because I want to get the legends on the front and the back end of this pick. But, Buck, I'll start with you first. Carolina, NC State. I don't know where Carolina will be at this point in the season. I've got them 8-2, I think, or 9-2 right here looking at the picks we've gotten. But, Buck, Carolina State, Friday after Thanksgiving, what you got?
But before I forget it, which I'm prone to do at my stage of life, Bauman, if you might want to put up Josh Tyree's question in the chat about the offense and defense at UNC, and we'll talk about that maybe to close the show. As far as NC State goes, I think NC State is a better team than North Carolina. They certainly have, at this stage of the proceedings, they've got a better quarterback in Devin Leary. We don't know how well North Carolina's quarterback is going to play. And Leary was 35 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. That's a Sam Howell year. And they're 12th nationally in returning production, 81%. They bring back almost everybody. They're good on both sides of the ball. They were top 30 in offense and defense last year. And they went 9-3 a year ago. They don't have many weaknesses. They did lose Icky on the left side, which is going to be a loss for, that's going to be something they're going to have to compensate for. And their running game was 13th in the ACC last year, and they lost their number 2 back. I don't know how well their running game will be next year. But even with all these positives, with the North Carolina State game making that matchup, the FPI has them ranked 9 spots lower than UNC. I don't know how they figure that, came up with that ranking, but North Carolina's 19th and NC State's 28th. The S&P Plus reverses that and ranks them State 18th and UNC 34th. So I'm going to pick North Carolina to win. Spoiler alert, that's over with. But why would I pick UNC to win? Because I do think NC State has a better team. Because when North Carolina and NC State plays, it doesn't matter who has a better team. It's all about who wants to win it the most. And, I think the one thing that Mack Brown can do to keep the UNC fan base in his corner is to beat NC State. And he has a good history of focusing on those kinds of rivalries, in-state rivalries. But my final point here is there's just not that much daylight between the two teams. This is the third game, this schedule, that the FPI and the S&P Plus disagree. The FPI has North Carolina as a 4.5 point favorite, which is weird if you think about it. And even state ranked 13th in the nation in the AP poll. But the FPI has them as UNC as a 4.5 point favorite. But the SP Plus has state as a 1.2 point favorite. So I'm still going to pick North Carolina because I think they'll ultimately end up winning this game. I think the offense will have time to get its act together, it being the 12th game of the season. So UNC finished the season with a win over NC State.
There it is, Vip, Carolina and State. How much does last year's game matter in this year's game?
I don't think it matters. But going off a point Buck was making earlier with North Carolina's like strength of schedule, this is going to be the fifth preseason top 25 team that UNC plays. That's second most in the country. Only Mississippi State plays more. NC State is returning like 16, 17 starters, it looks like. And this feels like it's the third time since he's been here in Raleigh that this is supposedly Dave Doran's best team. But I think North Carolina wins this game. Since Mack Brown has been back, he seems to have put a huge emphasis on this game, where the talk with this game is always the toughness, which team kind of bullies the other at the point of scrimmage. And since Mack Brown has gotten back, you look at what they did 2019, they ran all over them, ran them out of the building. 2020, did they play 2020?
Yeah,
Yeah.
beat them in Chapel Hill, didn't they? No, they played them right. I can't remember.
2020 they won. Okay, yeah, they 48-21, and then 2 touchdowns in 26 seconds, which I'm pretty sure still left a really bad taste. And anybody who cares about Carolina football, what happened in Carter Finley last year. But outside of that 26 seconds, this has been a rivalry that has been shifting towards UNC, towards Chapel Hill. And the recruiting kind of shows that. I think NC State has a talented team, but I think that this is a game that Mack Brown can kind of rally the troops and have North Carolina prepared to win. Just coach up the onside kicks, coach up the deep balls, and try to get out with a win.
Unbelievable. Jason, you're laughing about that. Hey, you recover an onside kick, and none of this state hype is happening this year, I don't think. Greg might say differently in just a second. But Carolina and Chapel Hill against NC State. I love Taylor's point about outside of 25 seconds or a minute and a half or whatever you want to say, Carolina's dominated this rivalry for the most part the last 3 years. But it don't matter if you can't close the deal. What happens this year?
So this is one place where I disagree with El Jefe. He said right up front that he thinks that NC State is the better team here, and I'm not sure I agree with him. They're certainly
the better team on paper.
On paper, and I'm not sure about that. I think it's interesting. They're the more hyped team, but and look, Leary is a good quarterback. I'm not sure that by the end of the year, Leary is going to be the better quarterback on the field. So that's number one. He's a good player, but I think Carolina by the end of the year is going to have a really good player taking snaps. So I think that basically evens that out or maybe even flips that. But the other thing for me is I look at the NC State offense, and Buck, you pointed out they lost a lot in terms of Ike on the outside. at that left tackle position. They lost one of the best tackles in the country. They lost their, I think, 2 best running backs, and they weren't that good running the football to begin with. And then the bigger loss to me is that they lost the guy who was responsible for those big plays down the sideline. And, what's that?
Amezi.
Yeah, Amezi is gone, and he's been the guy that has been the biggest thorn in everybody's side who's played NC State the last few years. He was a really good player, and I'm just not. They've got some guys. Yes, I'm not sure that anybody realizes how tough it's going to be for them to replace Amezi. And I think defensively they're going to be really good, but I don't think they're defensively in a whole different world than what Carolina at the end of the season should be as well, given the talent level in Chapel Hill. So you're looking at 2 teams that are going to line up and be pretty close to even, but I think Carolina is actually the deeper team on the line of scrimmage and is actually more well-equipped to go into this game and be the bully, which is what this game is going to be about. I think Carolina is going to have the better running game, and I think they're going to win the line of scrimmage, and I think that's going to be enough to win this game. So I've got Carolina winning this game. I've got it only at about a 60% chance of winning, but I think Carolina should be favored in this game at this point in the season.
All right, Greg Barnes.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's already been said. Buck and I have talked for 20 years about this particular rivalry, and one thing that tends to play out is that the team that dominates the run game typically wins. And last year, Carolina outgained State 297 to 113. And yet, because of a couple fluky minutes there at the end, they somehow lost. Jason brings up a lot of good points there. I do think State's got a good team. Defensively, they'll be stout. I think Devin Leary probably is better than he gets credit for in some circles. I know he gets a little bit of hype at the national level, but local, it seems like he's kind of undervalued. But they got a lot to replace, as Jason laid out offensively. I think they'll lose to Clemson early, and that they won't be able to make this a game that really matters for them outside of the rivalry aspect. I think that plays in Carolina's hands. And then just the embarrassment of what happened last year really works in Carolina's favor. And look, we can talk about App State. We can talk about Virginia Tech. We can talk about at Charlottesville. Mack Brown needs this game more than probably any other game on the schedule because of what happened last year. And to really go into the postseason with a positive vibe. Because we're not talking about 2023 right now, but this is the staging area. The 2022 season is the staging area for what should be a fantastic 2023 season. There's no reason for it not to be with how this team has recruited. And if you lose this type of game against a rival, I think that really slows momentum going into the postseason, into the offseason. So I think it's a very important game for Mack. I think the players understand that. I think the program understands that. I mentioned earlier, I thought the Pittsburgh game was a 50-50 toss-up. I think this one is too, but because I picked Carolina to lose to Pitt, I've got Carolina beating NC State in this
one. Greg Barnes, everybody. That's why Greg Barnes is the best, remains the best. Adam Smith has Carolina beating NC State. Ross Martin has Carolina losing to NC State, John. Let's bring in one person that wants to get in on this show badly. I think he's just off stage. I think you guys on this chat right here know him. John, can you bring in this young fella?
Hello.
Gregory Hall.
Hey, Gregory.
You got a lot of talent on stage.
I know. What?
Is that the Hotel California?
That is
yeah, pretty much is where I live.
It's a great wall. It's almost like Taylor's room. I mean, you need the lighting that Taylor has. Give us your picks, Gregory. We've been on here a long time. I know you've been wanting to get in. I asked you to come join us. What you got? Carolina's final record, and what are the big games, and how does it play out? Games like NC State, Wake Forest, Notre Dame.
They're 3-1 after non-conference. App game is, like you guys said, it's down to the wire, but it's a good game. UNC pulls it out. I said in the chat, if Notre Dame beats Ohio State, they kill Carolina. If Notre Dame loses to Ohio State, I think UNC has a better shot. I still don't think they win, but I think that kind of plays a role there, kind of like the Alabama effect, so to speak, as far as that first game of the season. Was it Miami that played Alabama week 1 a couple years ago, and it just completely just destroyed their season? So something like
happened
that.
to Florida State as well too. Yeah.
It destroyed
exactly.
Florida State's program. But anyway.
And then I was going back and forth between, obviously the 3 conference games are important, are Miami, Pitt, and Wake. And I've given like every single scenario as to what I think might happen. And I decided that UNC is going to beat Miami on the road. They're going to lose to Pitt at home, and they're going to lose to Wake on the road. And then both UNC and NC State are 9-2 going into that final game. But the only thing that gives you, or there's a lot of things that give UNC the advantage: home field advantage, senior day advantage, and UNC will actually, if they win that game, have a chance. If not, it might give them the Coastal win. Whereas if State wins that game, I think just with Clemson, they still don't get to win the Atlantic title. So I don't think State will have a chance at the Atlantic title, and I think UNC will have a chance at the Coastal title despite equal records. So 3-1, finishing 9-3, with a chance if tiebreakers work their way against Miami or against Pitt, so to speak. I think it'll be UNC and Pitt 6-2 in the conference, and then I'm not sure, the tiebreaker might go to Pitt there, but we'll see.
Gregory Hall, everybody. Appreciate it, Gregory. I think.
Oh, and UNC is going to get 40 sacks this year.
40. How many does?
I can't put that voodoo on him this year.
I've
made
Don't
my
you
thoughts
put that
on-
evil on him, Gregory. Don't you put that evil on him.
Exactly. So I went with the team over under 39.5 sacks. I'm taking the over. So I'm out. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Gregory.
Great seeing you, Gregory.
Great seeing you, Gregory.
He has caught as much for that pick as I have for 12-0. All right, guys. I've got Carolina beating State, John. I think this is a 9-3 regular season team, so I've got a loss in there somewhere. I'm gonna do like Jason said. I think they're gonna be 10-2, but they actually end up 9-3. So John,
you picked 10-2, but they're gonna be 9-3.
Somehow they're gonna win 10 games, but end up being 9-3. John, what's your pick?
I've got this as a win for North Carolina, putting them at 7-5 for the year. I don't think NC State's very good. I think the fact that they didn't have a bowl game last year and they got to sort of create their own narrative from the bowl season, it's really helped them this offseason. I think UNC wins this game. Also, quick shout out, Jason. I added up all your percentages, so you have a little bit of a math number here as well. Getting some advanced statistics here on the Inside Carolina show.
8.34. So that, I've got them as an 8-win team, but I think they're closer to a 9-win team than a 7-win team, which is, when I went through and I did my win shares on my own in preparation for this. That was what I came out to.
So folks,
is that Adam Smith that's got UNC at 6-4?
It's 8-4.
8-4. Okay, gotcha.
8-4 for Adam.
His raise time would have been looking bleak for him had he gone.
Shots fired. Adam, I hope you're listening. Know your audience, buddy. No, Adam's got them 8-4. Ross 7-5. John 7-5. I'm the optimist. But you've been calling me the eternal pessimist. I'm the eternal optimist.
You have been for 2 years in a row. But the funny thing about Tommy is he always was the IC pessimist, and now all of a sudden, I don't know what he's been drinking, but
ever since the live chat,
really good bourbon. I guess
the live chat gets him going.
I know. I'm really susceptible to peer pressure. I'm that guy at the club that'll drink any drink somebody buys me. So yeah, 10-2 for me. Greg 8-4, Taylor 9-3, Jason with his maths 8-4. Buck, you're at 9-3. Let's close out this show. We've been going for almost 2 hours. ACC championship game, Greg. Who's in it?
I have Pittsburgh and Clemson, with Clemson winning the ACC yet again.
Vip, what you got? ACC championship game.
I have the U versus Clemson. Clemson winning.
Buck, ACC championship.
Well, I've got North Carolina going 6-2 in the ACC, I think. So I think that would put them in the Coastal Division as a Coastal Division champion. So it'd be Clemson versus UNC, and North Carolina recovers a
onside
kick to win.
And after review, they find that he was not offsides. Jason, is this still Clemson's league?
Yeah, it's Clemson's league this year. Still, I think they're the best team still in this conference. I think the Pitt UNC game is for the Coastal Division Championship.
I'd agree with that.
So, I think part of the problem is that Miami plays Clemson cross division, and I think Clemson. Florida State's going to give Miami all they can handle as well this year. I think that's a coin flip game for Miami. So they've got a coin flip against.
Is that in Tallahassee?
Yeah, no, that's actually in Hard Rock. Okay. But that historically has been more Florida State fans in there anyway. So, but I think that's a coin flip game for them, and then I think the Clemson game they're going to lose, which then sort of puts the balance of the benefit in terms of scheduling this year to Pitt and UNC. I've got UNC losing that game in terms of my picks for the season, but of course Carolina with a 60% chance of winning that game. But I think whoever wins that game is going to be the Coastal Division representative. So since I officially picked Pitt, I'm going to go with Clemson versus Pitt, and Clemson wins the conference.
I guess if I've got them 10-2 with Notre Dame being one of those losses, they're 7-1.
They're waltzing it.
Yeah, they're in the ACC championship game and playing against Clemson. And as long as a couple guys in stripes I know aren't on the field, I think to Buck's point, they get that onside kick, and they go on to a miracle Mack Brown. They'll be doing Mack Brown statues outside Kenan Stadium. No, seriously, I think Carolina can get there. I will have to see it to believe it.
Tommy, are you predicting college football playoff for UNC? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, not only on your I saw your shorts on NCAA 14. Yeah, they won the national championship back-to-back on the video game. I believe it when I see it. Mack Brown's got to actually get it done. I think the less hype, the better for this North Carolina team, but I think there's opportunities, and I think the defensive line makes a huge difference for this team. So I'm going to close the show and let everybody get in just briefly before we get out. Josh Tyree, we've been holding the question for a long time. Carolina's offense has dominated the stat sheet for Carolina over the years. Greg, with the injuries, and we'll throw in with the recruiting, do you think this is the year Carolina's defense can actually be the difference maker and be better, if we want to call it that, than the offense this year?
No.
Good point. But what do you think?
I think this is an interesting conversation to have in terms of as we go through and rate the matchups, North Carolina against Pitt. Pitt's going to be more of a ground game kind of thing. I just wonder, and I think it would be a good thing if it was possible for North Carolina to be built so that they were able to win one of these rock fight games, where it's, 7-7 at half, 10-7 at half, and then win, 21-17 or whatever. Could that happen if North Carolina's defense does turn out to take a significant leap forward? Because like we're evaluating the Wake Forest game, and we assume it's going to be a shootout. But what if it's not? Those kinds of things I think come into play for this season, perhaps more than in previous seasons.
It's interesting. Taylor, what do you think? Last questions. Jason's ready to go. I sense the Dr. Strangelove room is closing down. But Taylor, is this the defense? Defense year right here.
The defense is not going to be better than the offense. If the defense is better than the offense, I think that means that Carolina is a top 25 team pretty easily. Since Phil Longo has been here, his average scoring offense is 21st in the country. I don't really get the complaints and the criticism when a lot of people talk about Phil Longo when he's produced a top 25 offense. it's been the defense that has been trending backwards. They were 108th in the country last year. I think it would be a major win if Coach Chizik could get this defense into the top half of the country. So like the 60th, the 50 to 60th range. I would take that as a massive win for North Carolina, because I think Phil Longo has kind of proved that his offense is a plug and play type offense. And Jason's kind of talked about it, that he's not really worried about the quarterback position. This North Carolina team has kind of emphasized that they're not worried about the quarterback position. So I think North Carolina is going to have a top 25 offense. I'm a huge believer in Coach Chizik, but I don't think he's turning water to wine. He's not walking on water. It's still a defense that I think it's going to be a fight to get them in the top 50 type range.
Interesting
take. Listen, folks, we've got.
I'm going to jump in.
Uh-oh.
I actually do think that this defense, if this defense talent-wise, if this defense does not turn out in the top 40, then there's still problems in terms of the messaging and the coaching staff and all of that. In terms of overall coaching and a variety of things, there's not as much to undo as what folks might think, given how bad they were last year. If they stay reasonably healthy, if they can stay healthy at the cornerback position, I think this is a top 35 defense or so, which is around, I think the offense should be in the around 30th or so as well. So I think the defense should be, based on talent and just the growth of experienced talent over last year, where last year, my warning going into the year is that the hype might be a year early and there was a lot of inexperience, and then they got hit with injuries. This year, if they can stay healthy, I think the defense is going to be around the same tier. I don't know that it'll be better. I think the interesting question is, I've got some real questions about the wide receivers and the ability to make plays downfield other than Josh Downs. So, that may be a major limiting factor for the offense, where they take a step back because they just don't have the guns on the outside that they've had. But, with the Antoine Smith injury and all of that, or Antoine Green injury, I did it again. With the Antoine Green injury at this point, that's going to slow the offense down some. I think this defense is going to be right around as good as the offense this year, maybe just a tick behind, but I think they'll be competitive.
If this is a top 30 defense, Bill Chizik's statue.
Well, I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's a matter of, you've got all of that talent that is now 2 and 3 years on campus, instead of being 1 and 2 years on campus, one of which was a COVID year where they weren't really able to learn and do all the strength and conditioning that you want. Basically, he's walked into a loaded cupboard, and it should be a major improvement defensively, just by virtue of the personnel maturing and getting a couple of the guys back from injury that they're getting. I think it's going to be, top 40, somewhere around 35th nationally defensively at the end of the year.
Folks want to know why I pick them 10-2 is because I listen to Jason. It's been
I'm sorry to have brought that up, but we're an hour and 53 minutes into this podcast, but it just seemed like a really important point that Tyree was bringing up there.
And I agree, and I think it's something we'll talk about all year. Next week, we'll try to do a little over-under stuff, maybe on the Game Plan podcast next week. We haven't done the over-under. I think over-under wins 8-5 or 8.5 for Carolina, and I'm going over. But, guys, it's been fun. I know you guys have had a long day. We made it a little bit longer. 2-hour Inside Carolina Prediction Pod. I can't remember the last time we sat together for 2 hours ever.
That's how we roll in the Prediction Pod.
And I wasn't even in my monologue mode until that last bit.
Yeah, without that, it would have been 3 hours.
Greg Barnes, Taylor Vippolis, John, you're always awesome producing these things. Shout out to Adam Smith and Ross Martin for submitting their picks and getting in on it. Gregory Hall for jumping in, and of course Johnny T-shirt, and El Jefe Buck Sanders for joining us. Be on the lookout for Buck's column in the morning. Be on the lookout for this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, however you get it, and also check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, like, review, always the good stuff. Next Saturday, We'll be in the bowls a lot from 5 to 7. You want to come out and see us there. Guys, it's always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tommy.